before getting too deep in the technical aspects of black and white photography, I thought it would be a good idea to start at the very beginning and ask the basic question, why even bother converting from color to black and white? Now, if you're a seasoned black and white photographer, you already know the answer to that question, but maybe you've never converted a color image to black and white, or maybe you've done so only on a few occasions. Either way, hopefully we'll answer that question for you. But regardless of where you're at on your black and white photography journey, we're also going to talk about when to convert to black and white. I personally think there are situations where black and white really excels and where conversion to black and white is worthy of consideration. First, though, I think it's important to emphasize, and most of you know this already, that there are no absolute rules. There's no right or wrong, there's no should. The decision to work in black and white is a personal one. And at the end of the day, if you prefer to work in color, that's fantastic. But I do think there are times where converting to black and white can result in a very powerful and impactful image, and in fact, one that's vastly superior to its color version. So the fundamental question, why consider conversion to black and white? Well, first off, black and white is a classic, timeless style. It has a long history. It's been with us for a long time, quite literally since the invention of photography itself, well before color film came along. It's the original format. Black and white has a nostalgic, old-fashioned feel to it. Now, this is not to say that your images will look old-fashioned, but it just kind of has that nuance to it. And black and white is reminiscent of some of those classic master photographers like Ansel Adams. Black and white also creates what I call an alternate reality. Well, we live in a color world. We see color. Heck, probably most of us even dream in color. So when we work in black and white, we're creating a different world, an alternate reality. And that reality is not just a replication of what we see, which is what happens when we work strictly in color. It has a different mood and feel or sense of emotion to it. And as such, it opens the door for some additional creative opportunities that, quite frankly, don't exist when we're working in color. But I think most importantly is that it removes color distractions. Color is pretty to look at. I mean, we like looking at color things, color photographs, color paintings, color movies, color television. But color can be distracting. It can take our eye away from important areas or elements of the image, maybe even the subject matter itself. And that's particularly true if those colors are bright and vibrant. So when we take away the color, we eliminate those distractions. We simplify the image. It helps us to clarify the story and theme that we're trying to convey, and even to highlight that subject of the photograph even better. When we talk about black and white photography, people often say it's all about light and shadow. And I agree with that. And when we remove those color distractions, we have an opportunity to work with that light and shadow to our advantage and create that impactful image. And in turn makes tonal contrast much more important. We no longer have color contrast to consider, and it's really about tonal contrast. We'll talk about that more in a future episode, but I did want to mention that that's an important aspect in black and white photography. And lastly, it emphasized what I call hidden elements that we might not necessarily notice in a color image. And those are things like lines, shapes, patterns, and textures. And we'll see some examples of that. Lastly, it's challenging and fun. I personally think that black and white images really need an additional bit of editing to make them stand out and be impactful. And of course, that can be challenging, but I think that's also where the fun comes in. So let's talk about a couple of myths that I've heard occasionally when it comes to black and white photography. The first one is that some photos simply don't look good in black and white and should not be converted. They should stay color. Well, I agree that there are images that may indeed be preferable in color. You may like them better in color. A good black and white image can, in theory, be made from virtually any color photograph. Now, remember, again, there was a point in time where there was no such thing as color. We only had black and white. So let's take a look at an example. This is a photo that I took in Italy of this iconic seaside village with its colorful buildings. You can see them there on that hillside. The red one in particular in the center. We've got the blue water, the blue sky. We've got some colorful boats in there too. So all in all, I think a pretty decent color image. And you may say, well, why would you even want to convert this to color? Well, again, that may not even be something I would consider, but I want to show you what it looks like in black and white. All of a sudden, we see a lot of different things here in the image. Our eye moves a little more readily around the image, and particularly up to the upper right-hand corner of the image. We notice some of the lines and patterns and textures in the other buildings to the right of that bright red one in the middle. We notice a lot more detail and texture in the foreground and midground. We notice a bit more detail on that dock and the boats, and even the sky has a bit more texture to it. So, all in all, I think this is a pretty worthwhile conversion. Okay. So, it's kind of a toss up for me, but I think it illustrates the point here that we can take an image that you might not initially think about converting and turn it to black and white, and it's not too bad. Let's look at another example. I'm not going to even show you the color version because I think you know probably what it looks like. You've seen other Milky Way photos. You probably have seen some images of the desert Southwest here in the United States. So you know what the colors are. And this is kind of an image where, you might not even consider converting to black and white. But I think when we do that, it takes on a completely different feel. It's almost mysterious, eerie. We see a lot more detail. We notice those other stars in the sky beyond just the Milky Way itself. We notice a lot more texture and detail and substance in the foreground, the midground, the cactus, and so on. So again, you may not consider converting a photo like this in the beginning, but I think it illustrates the point that you can make a very nice black and white photo from virtually any color image. The other myth, and it's not as common as the first one, is that converting to black and white can fix bad photos. I suppose if you did enough editing and such, you can obscure some minor imperfections. But let's face it, if it's a bad photo, it's a bad photo. Just don't go there, right? And remember, what we're trying to achieve here is that when we convert to black and white, we're trying to make a good photo even better. We're not trying to make a bad photo acceptable. And by the way, I don't have any examples to show you because, quite frankly, I don't take any bad photos. No, that's absolutely not true. I have plenty of examples here. All right, so that brings us to the question of when to consider black and white. Hopefully, I've made the point that any photo can be converted to a black and white. And while it's your choice whether to do so, it's theoretically possible that I can come up with an acceptable image. So when should I consider converting? Are there ideal or recommended situations? Well, as I've indicated already, yes, there are. And so let's look at some of those. The first one is where the colors in the photograph are muted or where the colors are minimal. There's only very few colors in the image. And the color is not essential to help us understand or identify the subject matter. So here's an example of an Adobe style modern building that I took in Phoenix. The colors are quite muted. Even the sky is kind of washed out. Yeah, not too bad, right? But when we convert it to black and white, I think it's a much better image, in my opinion. The shadows are more pronounced. We notice a lot more lines and textures here. So I think this is a perfect candidate for converting to black and white. Here's an example of this arched ceiling. It's essentially a monochromatic photograph because it's just one family of colors, these orange and yellow hues. Uh, not a bad image, but when we convert it to black and white, our eyes more readily travel from the bottom to the upper right-hand corner. We notice a lot more tonal contrast, the lines and texture in the concrete ceiling. So again, I think this is a perfect example where conversion to black and white makes a lot of sense. And the next case is where we have distracting colors that may take away from our subject matter. We talked about that already, and while this may not be the best example of that, I think it illustrates the point. And while I don't mind that pinkish wall in the background, when we convert it to black and white, we more readily pay attention to and notice that light bulb in the very center. So again, I think it simplifies, it draws our attention more readily to the subject matter. And this is one of the most important reasons I think for considering conversion to black and white. And that's where we want to bring attention to accentuate lines, textures, patterns, and also work with that interplay of light versus shadow. We're going to look at some examples of each of those. First one from fellow Barista Jazz, this train yard, uh, great black and white photo. I think that really shows off the lines, the train tracks, the poles, the electrical wires. Just a great example of how black and white can help us accentuate lines. Here's a photograph I took of a concrete wall. You can see the textures and patterns in that concrete wall. I don't think we'd be able to notice that quite as readily in a color image. Black and white does a great job with textures in concrete, rock, even clouds and water. Can the black and white can help accentuate those textures better. Here's a photo by Karen of a tilted building. Uh, we see a lot of repeating patterns, a lot of symmetry and lines. Black and white just does a great job here. You know, I don't know what the color version looks like, but I think this is, again, as I've stated before, a perfect example where black and white can help us bring attention to those elements. And then lastly, by Mona, this picture of a looks like a curtain up against the ceiling. It's just wonderful, the contrast between the dark shadows and the bright light that's leaking through the top of the curtain. Uh, just a wonderful example of light versus shadow that black and white just handles so well. I think another case where black and white excels is where we have minimalistic compositions and images with very large amounts of negative space. This shot by UC is a great example of that. The large wall with just some barely visible vertical and horizontal lines, and the seats at the lower part of the photograph. Again, I think anytime you have a minimalistic type composition, think about converting to black and white. I think it just works extremely well. It just emphasizes that negative space and the minimalistic nature of the photograph itself. Black and white works great where we want to enhance emotional depth or mood, particularly where we've got some adverse weather conditions, fog, rain, snow, those kind of situations. We have two examples here, one by Jazz again and by UC again. Both of these are great example of emotional depth and mood. And you just walk away with this sense that there's absolutely more to the story, and you just wanting to know what's behind both of these images. So wherever we have emotional depth or mood that we want to accentuate, black and white does a great job with that. And I think there are certain genres, particularly architectural and street photography, that work so well in black and white. In fact, I would go as far to say that they were made for black and white. The first example here by Wayne of this looking upwards at the skyscrapers, the converging lines, the luminescent wall panels on these buildings. Fantastic. I'm sure this looked great in color, but I think black and white just really accentuates that whole idea of these towering buildings. And the next image by Dave of the silhouetted individuals in this large space. Just again, the black and white, I think, just really works extremely well for street photography. And I think the last example, you just love black and white. I would say for myself, I work probably 98% in black and white. I convert virtually every photo that I have to black and white just to see what it looks like. More often than not, I'll keep it black and white and do some further editing. So really for me, it's pretty much close to 100% conversion. I may not share all those, but I pretty much convert everything that I shoot. All right, so that brings us to some takeaways. These are some things for you to think about and explore to help you on your black and white journey and understand a bit more about when and how to convert to black and white. The first one I think is very simple, is to study the works of some notable black and white photographers. You see some listed here. This is a short list. There are many more, of course. You may have some favorites of your own. And of course, don't forget those black and white photographers on Vero. Take a look at their work. Ask yourself, what makes their images so effective in black and white? What is it that makes it impactful and powerful? What is it that you like, or maybe you don't like about their images? And what are some things that you might want to try and emulate and use in your own work? So maybe make a list on a piece of paper about those kind of things, and think about that the next time you go out and shoot. So, in fact, go out and photograph situations that might look good in black and white, particularly based on the previous slides and the examples that we gave you, and then convert to black and white. Did the black and white images meet your expectations? Why or why not? Then go back into your portfolio and convert some of your older images to black and white. Did any surprise you? Were they better in black and white? Why or why not? And then every time you convert to black and white, I'd really encourage you to experiment with some different edit settings and post-processing. I think, as I alluded to earlier, that black and white really demands some additional processing. That doesn't mean to say you got to do a lot of fancy stuff with layer masks and such. May only want to adjust exposure and contrast, and that's fine. But I would encourage you to try some different settings, because I think this is where you can really create an impactful image. And lastly, I would say if you decide to continue working in black and white, do so with intent. Don't just convert to convert. Convert when it makes sense to you. Convert when you want to. And then set up your shots with that final black and white image in mind. So things like subject selection, composition, exposure. And I think that's where really you can start creating some very powerful images. And then again, as I said, edit them to create an impactful image and to find your styles. You may have more than one style when it comes to black and white. I think I do. So again, those are the takeaways. Those are some things you may want to jot those down and start thinking about those a bit. So I guess thanks for watching. We, of course, welcome any questions, comments, or suggestions you might have. And as a way of teasing you to look forward to our next episode, we're going to talk some more about tonal values in black and white photography. I sort of mentioned that already. So we look forward to having you watch us the next time. Thank you.